let me hit you with something that could quietly reshape how millions of people in the UK save and invest. For years, the ISA has felt like one of those financial rules that would always stay the same. Simple, safe, reliable. But from 6th April 2027, that comfort changes in a very real way. The overall ISA limit stays at £20,000, but for under 65s, the cash ISA limit drops to £12,000. If you are 65 or over, you can still save up to £20,000 in a cash ISA each year, and the government says this change will be introduced through secondary legislation before it takes effect. Now, that might sound like a small technical adjustment. It is not. Because when a rule changes where people keep their money, it changes how people think about money. And when enough people change how they think, the whole market starts to move differently. So in this video, we are breaking down what this 2027 ISA change actually means, why the government is doing it, who it affects most, and what smart savers should be paying attention to right now. Let's get into it. First, let us clear up the biggest confusion. A lot of people hear ISA change and assume the whole allowance is being cut. That is not what is happening. The ISA subscription limit remains £20,000, and the new rule is specifically about cash ISA. In other words, the government is not removing the tax shelter. It is changing how much of that shelter can be used for cash saving by most adults under 65. That matters because cash ISA have always been the easiest option for people who want their money to feel safe. No stock market swings, no red numbers on an app, no worrying about whether the market is up or down this week. Just money sitting there, slowly growing. And there is nothing wrong with wanting security. For emergency funds, short-term goals, and people who cannot afford volatility, cash can be sensible. But the problem is that many people have treated cash ISA as their default wealth-building tool, even when their money would have needed more growth to keep up over the long run. That is exactly the behaviour the government is trying to shift. In its 2025 budget speech, the Chancellor said the UK has low levels of retail investment compared with other G7 countries, and argued that people who had invested in stocks and shares over time could have ended up significantly better off than if they had stayed in cash. The policy direction is clear: keep the tax-free wrapper, but encourage more money into investment. That is why the new setup is so important. Under the new structure, if you are under 65, you can still use the full £20,000 ISA allowance, but only £12,000 of that can go into cash. The remaining part of your allowance would need to go into other eligible ISA types, such as a stocks and shares ISA, if you want to use the full limit. That is the real shift, not a reduction in the headline ISA number, but a reduction in cash flexibility. And that is where the real-life impact begins. Because a lot of people are going to look at this change and think, fine, I will just keep doing what I'm doing. But imagine someone who has been putting large sums into a cash ISA every year, telling themselves they are being careful. Now the rules say they can no longer put as much of that money into cash if they want to use the full ISA allowance. That creates a decision point. Do they keep some money in cash for security, or do they start putting more into investments for growth? That is a very different mindset. And for people who have been waiting to learn about investing later, this change may be the nudge they did not ask for, but will have to respond to anyway. To be fair, that is not automatically a bad thing. For long-term wealth building, investing has advantages that cash often cannot match. Cash protects capital, but it usually does not compound fast enough to build serious long-term growth on its own, especially after inflation. That is why the government is signalling a stronger tilt toward investment behaviour, not just saving behaviour. But let us not overdo the panic. This is not the end of cash ISA. This is not the end of ISA. And this is definitely not a sign that every saver suddenly needs to become a stock picker overnight. What it does mean is that the old habit of treating the cash ISA as the default answer is about to become less useful for many people. From a practical point of view, this change forces savers to be more intentional. If your money is truly for emergencies, then cash still makes sense. If your money is for a house deposit in the very near future, cash may still make sense. If your money is for a goal that is many years away, then the new rules may push you to think harder about whether every pound should stay in cash. And that is a healthy question, because too often people confuse safe with smart. Sometimes they are the same thing, sometimes they are not. Here is another detail that makes this change worth paying attention to. The government has said the ISA limits will be kept in place until April 2031, which means the new structure is not a one-year experiment. It is being set up as a longer-term framework. That gives people time to adjust, but it also means the policy is intended to stick around. So what should you actually do with this information? Start by understanding where your own money is sitting. If most of your ISA contributions go into cash, ask yourself whether that is because you genuinely need cash or because investing feels complicated. If it is the second one, then this change may be your sign to learn the basics properly. Not to gamble, not to chase hype, just to understand how stocks and shares ISA work, what risk really means, and whether your goals require more growth than cash can realistically provide. That is the part people regret missing, not the rule itself, the preparation. Because the people who do well financially are usually not the ones who panic when the rules change. They are the ones who notice early, understand the direction, and adapt before the crowd catches on. And this one is very clear. The government wants more people investing. It wants less of the ISA system being used purely for cash. It is keeping the overall allowance at £20,000, but narrowing the cash slice for most adults under 65. That is not a rumour. That is in the official Budget 2025 documents and technical note. There is one more thing worth saying. If you are 65 or over, the change does not hit you in the same way. The government says savers in that age group will continue to be able to put up to £20,000 into a cash ISA each year. So this is not a universal cut for everybody. It is targeted. That detail matters because it tells you the policy is not random. It is designed to shift behavior in a specific direction, for a specific group, for a specific reason. And once you understand that, the whole story becomes clearer. This is not just a savings rule, it is a signal that the rules of personal finance in the UK are nudging people away from passive cash holding and toward more active long-term investing. And whether you love that idea or hate it, it is better to understand it now than to be surprised by it later. So here is the simple takeaway. If you are using an ISA, use it deliberately. If you are saving for something near-term, keep enough cash for peace of mind. If you are saving for the long term, start thinking seriously about growth, not just safety. And if you have been ignoring ISA altogether, this is probably the wrong time to stay passive. Because the people who win with money are usually not the loudest people in the room. They are the ones who notice the quiet changes early, the ones who read the small print, the ones who adapt before the headlines catch up. And that could be you. If this helped you understand the 2027 ISA change more clearly, subscribe to the channel, because this is exactly the kind of money news that can affect your future before most people even realize it has started. And in money, being early is often the same as being ahead.